She's our featured author at the museum for this year, and she was also one of the foundational members in constructing the Gunflint Trail Historical Society and Chik-Wauk Museum and Nature Center. So we are very excited to have her here today and hear about all the time that she's spent on South Gunflint Lake and around the rest of the Gunflint Trail. So without further ado, allow me to present Betty Hemstad to you.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to see all of you here today. Some of you have moved away and come back just for today, and it's a real treat for me. And we're going to remember together some of the activities we were involved in, and we'll look at nature as I've seen it through my eyes, maybe differently through your eyes, and through the lens of my camera. So that's why I'm sort of off to the side. You don't have to look at me. I hope you focus on the screen. And we'll look at events in my life that I've tried to give back when I tried to give back to the Gunflint community through the years. And sprinkled between will be stories and tidbits, how nature and people have added to my personal enjoyment of every moment that I've been on the Gunflint Trail. I am most grateful. And right now, I have goosebumps looking at all of you. We have a couple items of business. One is, I'd really like it if you would save your questions till the end of the presentation, because some people probably would like to move on. And also, today I brought along the seed of the nodding trillium. Not too many people get to see them, because they're not everywhere. And come on and look at it when you want to. And also, one question that I'm always asked when we get to the part about organizing the Chick-Wauk Museum project is, how did you organize that? Well, I brought along, because I happened to save just from one of the last meetings that we had, the Gunflint Trail Historical Society meeting, of my notes that I'd set out with blanks left for people and volunteers to sign what they would be willing to do to turn this Chick-Wauk resort into a museum. And you might just want to see what we were thinking about at one meeting, and then you'll know how we did. So, let's move on to the story. Our family's history began in the 1970s when we traveled up the North Shore with our teenagers during MEA weekend. And soon we graduated to going up to the Gunflint, to the Gunflint Lodge. The Trading Post building, some of you probably remember it well, was in the middle of the current parking lot. And of course now we all miss Justine's building, home. Looking back, it is now very difficult to imagine that in the late fall we actually took our meals at Bruce and Sue's dining table in their private residence. It's a little different, isn't it, today? In the summer, our experiences also included a boat trip to Little Rock Falls on the Granite River and Bridal Falls on Gunflint Lake. And very quickly, our family was caught in nature's embrace. Little did we know that Nancy, my daughter, seen in overalls in the top left picture, would someday be the naturalist leading people for Gunflint Lodge for the very same spot. And the picture on the lower right, I'd like to just introduce my family so you know who I'm talking about sometimes. The person at the left again is Nancy, then my husband Ron, Judy, who's seated here, she's been helping me, and my son Peter. On the way home from a very long weekend, the conversation included, Ron, if we had a piece of this wilderness, our kids would never have to see a psychiatrist. A few years later, I read Les Black's book, Meet My Psychiatrist. His psychiatrist turned out to be a moss-covered log in the middle of the forest. I also had a visit from a psychiatrist. You'll hear about that later. The journey wouldn't be complete without telling you that in the 70s, it was understood that Russell Blankenberg owned most of the available building lots. After visiting the Blankenbergs in their kitchen over the friendly wood cook stove, remember that, at least 3 times, and each time Russell would say, "I'm so sorry, but I don't have anything for sale right now." Well, we didn't give up. And about the 4th time, if you remember Russell, he pulled his red suspenders forward and said, "I have something for sale. I'm so happy to tell you. I have 1 lot for sale." And I'm thinking,
You touched your mic.
oh, I touched the mic. Excuse me, I didn't know. I think it went off too. Did we blow the fuse? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Or do you want to check this in? Okay.
No dramatic flare. And your heart stopped.
Is it on again? No. Oh dear. Don't count these minutes, just part of my hour. Okay, I'll speak a little more loudly meanwhile. Okay, so he said 1 lot. I said 1, not 2, not 3. I don't have a choice. It's just 1. I'm going to have to see what it is. Well, it turned out to be what some people call a cedar swamp. Well, it has never been that since the day we moved in. Believe me, it's been the most wonderful place on earth. Russell's prediction, I forgot to tell you this. He said, "The reason I picked this lot for you is because I now know that you like wildflowers. And there'll be more wildflowers on that lot than on most other places up here." And Russell was correct, and it's true. We did have lots of wildflowers and still do. I want to tell you where this place is, so just so you sort of understand. Now this is that. What's next?
I think it's because it's so bright, so if you shine it down, lower on the screen, you'll see the light. And
But
then
it just goes off even when I hold it. Okay. Should we get it?
just about everybody knows.
I'm sorry, folks.
Yeah.
We know. I didn't realize that this could happen. Okay, where is this property that I'm talking about? I don't know, just thought maybe I can sort of, this is Grand Marais. I think you all have seen this type of map before, but Grand Marais, follow the Gunflint Trail up. Gunflint Lake is right up there, and we're on the south shore of Gunflint Lake. And to get there, of course, you turn on the Gunflint Lake Road, South Gunflint Lake, and then continue on for a couple miles, and you'll come to some beautiful pine trees, and that's where the Mile of Pine begins. And it was a Mile of Pine until we lost a lot of them in the blowdown. On the property itself, there's a huge rock wall, because there's a lot of fall from where you enter the property and then go the whole way down to the lake. So a lot of you maybe have properties like that too. But the rock wall is absolutely gorgeous. And I just wanted to show you this. You can see the size of that cedar tree, and it was there when we moved in, and it's still there, and it's just growing out of the side of the rock wall. And it's also pictured in the museum right over there. Something for everyone to see. What else does this property have? It has a wonderful creek going through the whole property. That's the way it looked the first time I saw it. And of course I would fall in love with that. And then, since then, I've done some clearing, of course, next to it, so I can meditate a little bit at the area on the left, and then on the right, I can see that from my dining room window. So what a wonderful lot he picked out for us. And then if you continue down, of course, you see Canada on the other side of the lake. our cabin was built by Emerson Morris, Jim Holman, and Mark Wendt. And the purlins in the ceiling were gotten on Iron Lake. I'm trying to drop lake names for you today so you can sort of see how the entire area sort of becomes part of whatever happens on your property. And as with most cabins, and I've even seen a booklet in a friend's cabin that on the outside the big headline was "Never Done." Well, sometimes cabins are never done, and they certainly aren't ever done in my cabin, for one thing anyway, and it was my responsibility. I said, oh, I'll design and make the wood lace, Dutch lace I called it, above the kitchen sink. Well, I don't know if you can see it, but only one medallion has been finished, and I still have to do a moose, a raven, a deer, and so I just say, very soon. The exterior is the same, and in those days, I just had to put this here, of course, you can't, well, some people can call window washing company, but I ended up on the ladder most of the time. Some people come up to the Gunflint because they want to fish, some to hike, maybe to see an elusive moose, of course to canoe. But my interest grew as I'd find a seed pod while I was out hiking and wondered what beauty was there before. And I emphasize the word beauty because I focus more on the beauty than the scientific names of everything. I just like to see nature as it is and appreciate it to its fullest. If you are, as many people do, if you're going 50 miles an hour or even over the speed limit on the Gunflint Trail, and this is how you see flowers. You see the invasive daisy, and that's all you see of it. Well, what I hope that you'll understand is that I really think you have to look to really see. And that means stop. Look quietly at the bud of the daisy. Look at the daisy with its ray flowers and its disc flowers. The disc flowers, of course, are in the middle, and we enlarged this a little bit. It's not clear, but I think you get the point. At some time in the development of a daisy, there's a 5-pointed star on the tip of every one of those little flowers in the middle of the daisy. And now, if you go back later in this season, again at a particular time, and look at the seeds forming, you will see a daisy on the top of every seed. And when I saw that, I knew that I wanted to just search while I was up here for everything that I could find about wildflowers around me. So let's look at a couple more wildflowers. We won't go into that much detail, but let's for now. You probably have some columbine in your garden at your home, but if you find one in the wilderness like I did that one, it's really a very special gift. I won't talk about everyone, but the bud, a whole grouping, a single flower. I mean, now can you imagine designing something like that and taking the time to look at it in its, and then what happens to the seed? Another 5-pointed star or another flower. The Calypso Orchid is not very familiar with a lot of people because it's rather rare. I haven't seen one now. Early on I saw them almost every year. I haven't seen one now for at least 7 to 10 years. And maybe one of the reasons is when you're out hiking, you would have to look at a plant that is about this tall and has a leaf about this big. And they're sort of, most of the time they're not grouped together. It's also called fairy slippers, and I think you can see why. And its seed pod, that's the only one I've ever found in 50 years. So, you all know the violets, we can go quickly on that one. But have you seen the seeds of the violet? The ants do a good job with those by carrying them off, going underground, and then they help nature by planting a violet someplace else. This water lilies is usually are found in a quiet bay, and of course they're so elegant when they're in full flower. But what happens after that? The flower closes up again, and I hope you can see this. I'm just going to go over because I really want you to be able, because I didn't have a camera that would take the correct picture of it. Can you see what's happening to the stem here? It pulls the flower down underground, underwater, and it matures there. Then it opens up, spreads the seeds to the top. Nature provides a breeze, so the seeds float a little bit farther away, and then when they become waterlogged, they go to the bottom of the water area and into the soft, mucky soil, and you have more water lilies. And then I went down to get one because I wanted to see what was happening down there. And again, at one stage, because pretty soon maybe they'd all turn brown, and if you went down and got one, you'd say, what is she talking about? They're brown. Well, this is what I found when I opened the one that I got. Marsh marigolds, don't we love them after winter? Waiting for the first bud to open. And you, of course, see them like this along creeks or moist areas in the ditches. And then what happens when the seed forms? There's another flower. And even Justine Kerfoot, who you probably all recognize that name, told me after she saw my picture of this, Betty, I've never seen that before. So it was really fun, and now maybe you'll look for them too. I hope you will. We all look for the pink lady slipper. They sort of tease you a little bit, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to see a white one. No, this is just its early stage. Then of course it develops into this gorgeous, strong blossom. And many times you'll find its seed pod from the year before just right above it, because of course it hasn't rotted away. And this is one of my two favorite photos that I've ever taken of flowers up here. And you can't count them right now, but I counted 58 pink lady slippers in one frame of them, and there were more. I just couldn't, my camera didn't reach out to any more. Unbelievable. Then what happened? The blowdown came, and all of those trees, all of them, went down. And then the fire came and burned it all up. But because they were jack pine, and you know jack pines have to have heat in order to release their seeds, now it's another jack pine forest coming in. Some of you are young enough, so maybe you can go back to that spot and see the field of lake slippers again. The Pipsissewa is in here to remind you that you can't just walk by plants and say, oh, okay, I guess it's a pink flower. Sometimes you have to get down on your knees and look carefully at it. There's the bud, which is beautiful in itself, almost like a piece of sculpture. And this is what you find if you looked at the flower from the bottom side, up, if you turned it upside down. And surprise, surprise, a bunch of flowers and the seeds. At least that's what I see when I look at it. And the last flower we'll talk about is the water smartweed. And we're in a canoe on the Granite River. And if you came upon that site, I'm sure you would want to know what's the pink in the distance. Well, if you see them in bud form, here's a close-up of the bud, and isn't that a beautiful construction? And this is in full bloom, and I will just tell you that on that stem, you'll see the bud, the full flower, and the seed pod. And here's my all-time favorite. You're all familiar with Monet's Water Lilies. Well, this is my Monet's, Betty's Water Smartweed. And it's my favorite shot that I've ever taken, and it was taken that same day. The culmination of this project came in 2009, and I did work on it for over 25 years. Because if you think about this particular book, it has 120 wildflowers in all the seasons, and 5 seasons each, so you're talking about 600 photographs. And so what I had was a huge piece of foam core, and with all little squares in it to fill in for each of 120. So can you imagine right now a puzzle with 600 points, and you had to fill everyone in with a photo that you liked? So that's why it took me so long. And if you're on the Gunflint and you tire of the wildflowers, there's certainly other families that you can look for, other subjects. Last year, I decided I was going to look at the moths. And guess what, older people, they come to you. You don't even have to go hiking. You just have to leave a letter. And they'll come at night, and we'll just go through these quickly. The Luna moth, the St. Lawrence tiger moth, probably St. Lawrence, the Virginian tiger moth, the laugher, what a good name for that one.
Wow.
The one-eyed sphinx, that happens to be on a rock that color. So the harnessed tiger moth. So you can see there's, and I probably found 50 different species. And then one morning, and I, of course, these were on the siding of our cabin, I went out and I saw this, and I said, my goodness, what is that? And I couldn't figure it out, so I called my friend Dave on Devil's Track, who also, by the way, gave the museum these butterflies here, and was a good resource person, and he said they are from the green lacewing moth. And then you all know the Polyphemus moth. There's a story with that, but we don't have time. And if you get tired of the moths themselves, why don't you look for their caterpillars? Here's the caterpillar for the Polyphemus. Certainly a tasty thing for any bird, don't you think? And then the most unusual caterpillar I ever saw was this white marked tussock moth. And I looked up what the moth looked like, and it was really drab, just all shades and tints of brown. Thinking of the moths, and in relationship to butterflies, there are 135,000 moth species in the United States, and 750 species of butterflies. But we all talk about the butterflies and really not the moths. Okay, let's try our luck at finding some mushrooms, and we've probably been doing this lately if you've been out. Just 2 years ago, I saw this one for the first time on our property, the scarlet wax cat, completely red, just wonderful. You all know the puffball, probably eaten those. This pink one that's coming up was the size of a dinner plate and spaced all along the hiking path that I was on about every 3 feet for about 12 of them in a row, quite unusual. And then one day, I found what I call the world's smallest mushroom. Just didn't have time to grow, I guess, because I picked it. But I wanted you to see that if you're looking for mushrooms that size, you have to bend down, and this is what you would see. Do you see it in there?
Yeah.
You see it? Sort of fun when you go discovering it. Okay, let's move on to some other friends. The upper left one is what many times we see, don't we, when we're driving along with bears just running into the woods ahead of us. But one day when we were still feeding birds, I looked out my dining room window, and I need to tell you, I'm 6 feet from this, at the most 7. There was a mother with 4 cubs. Quite a treat, I thought. It was wonderful. And I have a story about a bear. If we have time later, you can ask me, I'll tell you. Okay, the deer, the marten first. Okay, this marten appeared at my feeder, and we would see martens a lot many years ago. I haven't seen one of those now for 10 years. And it looks like you'd want to cuddle it, doesn't it? But look at the claws. And then on the right, one evening, or at night, if you can see it was dark, I used a flash, there were 3 immature martens playing at the same place. The deer, we used to have, Ron and I counted as many as 17 at a time, because that's when we still put out some cracked corn for them. We thought that's what we should do, because we'd like to see them. We don't do that anymore. But there is a story with this, because one day as I was looking out the window, the deer was looking at me, and then it shook its head like this, and one of its antlers fell off right there. I mean, can you imagine? And so I told Ron, you gotta take a picture, this is too unusual. Well, then when I went in, I picked up my camera again, and the deer came back, stood next to where it had been eating, and looked right at me, and I think it was saying, thanks for giving me the corn. And of course, you'd be disappointed if I didn't mention moose, wouldn't you? They're here all seasons, just summer, fall, winter, you can find them. Fishing, it was not something that I did, but my husband liked to fish, but didn't catch many. But a grandson certainly caught one that he was very proud of. Certainly butterflies, tiger swallowtail was one of my favorites to see. And a neighbor called and said, Betty, you've got to see this, come on over. And there was, we had a little rain the night before, so it was moist, and they had burned in this area. And all of these, and you think that's a lot, don't you, when you look at it? Well, this is like 1/6 of the pile, so you have to multiply this by 6 to think how many were gathered in one area. Dragonflies are always so welcome because you're waiting for them to start eating those nasty mosquitoes. And here you see the stage of the adult dragonfly emerging from its nymph stage. And it's very vulnerable at that time because it can't fly and has to get its wings dried and so on. And then you see the dragonflies at the right, and they're making more dragonflies. And they're red ones, so that was on the Iron Lake Road. When you used to drive down there and there was a whole school area, maybe some of you remember that. Well, guess who you're going to meet? This is my psychiatrist. One day I walked out onto the deck, and it was after many very warm days, and I thought that this toad was dried up. It looked like it was really on its last. So I went in and got some water and popped the little friend in, and for about an hour and a half, I just sat there to listen to watch what would happen, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and finally it climbed up to the edge of its tree and looked right at me, and believe me, we were nose to nose, 3 inches apart, and for quite a while I just had the feeling this toad understands me. So we had a conversation, and I could tell it all my troubles. I knew it wouldn't tell anyone else. And soon I took it out and put it in the forest floor. And he never returned because I guess I never had need of a psychiatrist again. Birds, of course, we have to mention them. We used to have lots of grosbeaks when we fed them. Now I don't see them anymore because we don't feed it all the time. But the raven, of course, still visits often. And when Ron and I would be having lunch on the deck, we would share our sandwiches with putting little bits on the railing, and the raven would come down and take one and fly away, and we were having fun doing that. And then finally I said, Ron, I'm getting tired of getting up and putting something out for that raven, so I'm gonna put a whole bunch of lights out. So I put 7 in a row, about 12 inches apart for each one. Well, here came the raven, and now you're guessing what happened. The raven picked up the first one, the second one, the third one. He picked up all 7, and you can count them, they're all in his mouth before he flew away. Of course, the goldfinches were our friends. Everyone loves the loons. Here, what you're witnessing is the resident loons telling the intruder to leave. And then at the bottom, you have to look closely, but this is the red-eyed vireo on her nest, and luckily she poked her head out so I could get her red eye. And her nest is a hanging nest, and it's made out of lichen and spider webs. And if you tire of looking at the birds themselves, why don't you look for something that evidence that a bird has visited you? And that, of course, would be in the feathers. And I added this barred owl feather because it's so unusual, I think, to see. It's so different. One side is rather firm, and then the bottom side is very soft. So if you've ever been, ever had an owl fly over and you hear, it's probably the air going through those soft feathers. And then I always like to share with my friends back in Minneapolis. And so if they're having a birthday or something, and this was for my grandson's engagement, had to pick some flowers from my garden and add a feather to send greetings. I'm tired of doing that because it's hard getting the birch bark at the right stage. Okay, I hope you caught on to the fact that what I'm doing, I hope, is encouraging you to look to find all these different things that I'm talking about. I play games with myself a little bit. I tell myself, okay, look at the backside of these today if you're bored. And this one was taken in the fall, quite early fall, and it's just the backside of what you all know as camper's toilet paper or the large leaf aster. And look how beautiful that is. Isn't it wonderful? And you've seen galls on the wild rose bushes. Have you ever looked inside? Well, I hadn't until one day when I wanted to find something different. And you can't see it, but when I cut the gall open, it was just a very busy area of these little worms. What would I was calling them something else before, grubs. And I quickly put it down and decided I didn't have to look in another one. Something else that's sort of fun to do is to look for patterns on leaves. I call this leaf lace, sort of broken, but that was, just like the basic design of it. And then Arrowhead Electric had been doing some trimming, and don't forget to look at the pile of twigs they left behind. You're not laughing, you don't see anything. Okay, I have to tell you what I saw. This is a dancing lady. She has her head back, so you can't see her head, her arms in the air, and she's doing a high kick. Now do you see her?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. Uh-oh. I did something. Another stop.
That's fine.
Oh, I picked up the wrong one. Hey, folks, I'm 87. Is that okay if I
You're doing good.
Okay, it's really fun in nature to look at a small piece of land, earth, or in an old stump or something, and to see what's happening, to see what insects go by. Take an hour sometime, because you will really be surprised. And in here, there's a wildflower, there's a berry brewing, there's a couple of mushrooms, there's a cedar tree starting, and of course the moss, and you just wonder, who's going to win out in all of that? It's fun. One day, I I like lichen, of course, I love all of nature, but lichen is really fun. And I came upon this one the day I was looking for lichen, and I don't think there's a more beautiful grouping of lichen on earth. If you have, take a picture of it and send it to me. It's just wonderful to see some of these things. One time I went out and said, okay, today you're gonna look up, not down. And I don't know if you can see can you see what's happening at the top of these trees? Okay, this, my grandson told me, is called that I was on Fish Gut Road. And the seagulls were at the tippy top of these trees, and there were 9 of them in total, what I was looking at, but I got 7 of them in this particular picture. So don't forget to look up. And then maybe you want to walk behind a woodshed or someplace, and if there's a couple of old boards lying down, pick it up and see what's underneath it. Well, I found this fishing spider came tearing around and went to the front side of the board, of course, but it had been sitting right next to this wonderful egg case. And and I think it's interesting how they're all in rows and so on, beautiful. I do love spiders, and this spider on the left was at the front door, and it had a bright yellow square on its bottom and a black center. There's another big story with this other spider, and by the way, that spider I'm standing right next to right here, for later, I guess, if we have time. Okay. Interspersed between nature was a desire to give back to the Gunflint community as well. And so I served on the North Shore Healthcare Foundation board. Ron and I were president of the Gunflint Lake Property Owners Association. And at that time, that also meant that you had to chair the canoe races. And I think you know that that's no little job. Volunteering in the Gunflint community was always rewarding. And you can see here that making the rewards was also rewarding. And of course, because I like to take pictures of things, first prize had to be the blueberry for the blue ribbon, and the other 2 are the red and the white caneberries. Okay, it's not all happiness. Other things happen to us up here, don't they? Nature has a way. The wildflowers in 2007 and 21 and the blowdown in 99 were really tough times. Someone else took this picture, but I know it's my husband and me standing on the shore, and if you took it, you can tell me and I'll give you credit. But that was what we saw on the other side of Gunflint Lake. And then later on, the sky was very angry and very dark, and you can see the sun is about to set, but look right above it a little bit, and you can still see that it really was a blue sky day, but it was so dark and angry. And now, some of you might have discovered it already, if you like butterflies, but turn your head to the right a little bit, and you'll see a butterfly. And butterflies are the symbol for the resurrection, I think you know that, and it said to me, the forest will recover. And of course, we see that it has been. And the last photo there is of the, I just wanted you to see what happens with wildfires, how they progress, starting slowly, and then one day it almost doubled in size. Here's my husband and a grandson walking down the driveway before the blowdown. Here is the same driveway after. You gotta let that soak in for a minute.
This was in 1999.
Yes. And Arrowhead Electric came 2 weeks later, and that was just fine, to give us electricity again. And here you can, I think, can you see that little circle? Okay, and then we enlarged it on the right, so you can see that it really was, man, working in that situation. Our front door is behind those grandchildren right there. The trees tipped over on the cabin, but we didn't have a lot of damage on the cabin, but look at the damage on that tree. Can you imagine the force of do you do when this happens to you? You decide to wheel plant, so other generations can have a forest around them. And here, the seeding, and then, because at that time we had all these deer, we had to hurry and, cover them so that we would see them the next year. You've probably done that. If you're driving along the Gunflint Trail and look up to one side, right past Gunflint Lodge turnoff, and this is the site, upper left, and 6 years ago I took a picture on the right, and now they have grown to about twice its size. And this is my picture that I think tells the complete story. First you see the blowdown in the background, and then the fire. And the fire was in May, and in August, the wildflowers were blooming already and beautifying the area. One of my biggest challenges in the last 50 years was presented in 2005 when neighbors had been discussing the importance of preserving the history of the Gunflint Trail. And it was a real concern that many of the personal stories were being lost because the older people were passing. So in 2005, this was my first glance at Chik-Wauk. And of course the wildflowers, I had to make sure that we saw those. And Bruce and Sue Kerfoot called one day and took my husband and I out for a ride, and this is where we ended up. Little did I know what they had in mind. But after much negotiating, I agreed to chair the project of turning the resort into a museum, but with the help of hundreds of neighbors and the U.S. Forest Service and a wonderful museum outfitter, Split Rock Studios in Minneapolis. And I want to emphasize the volunteers because, folks, it takes a lot of people to do this project. And we had, or I guess that was my decision, but concluded that we had to ask people to take on a committee assignment for 5 years. And that's really something to ask for 5 years of someone's commitment. But everybody stepped up. Very few people really didn't want to be part of it. This also meant that the Historical Society would have to enter into because the Forest Service owned the land, that we had to enter into a long-range lease agreement with them. They own the land that you walk on around here now, and the lease calls for 50 acres surrounding the museum building. What did I see when I walked up to the building? The first thing I saw was this. Of course, my camera always had to see all these things. And then this, I just wanted you to see what happened. We had to take the whole front porch off. I had to get a professional group from Duluth to do this. Every stone that was there before had to be put back into the same area. And now you will see the finished product. And now you're looking at the corner inside the museum, right inside. And this is what it looked like. And now this is what we see. Bonnie's going to love that. And she's up working right now. So, but it's so, and she always has a wonderful smile and a welcome to everyone. Because we divided the duties, my duty was to be in charge of the presentation in the museum, and so I would spend time over at the museum outfitters at Split Rock Studios, and here you see the white pine in progress. They are creating the white pine, and if you look at it carefully in the museum, you'll think that it was one someone saw it in the forest. I wanted to give credit to Tom Stewart, the artist who painted the mural. Talking about volunteers, people really came forward. I think, and I might be wrong on this, somebody here might be able to correct me, I think there were 480 panes, window panes that had to be dealt with. And then here we have Sharon and Fred. They were painting. Fred did take on a huge responsibility of working with helping the building come alive again. And here we have Mark, Bruce from the Historical Society, and then a gentleman from the Forest Service, and they were working together, and I forgot his name, if anyone knows it, tell me. And here's Mike and Kathy, they're here today. I want to give credit to them folks. They have been with, everyone through all the, growing pains. Kathy is still here on Mondays and Tuesdays, I believe you have it correct, Kathy. She has worked this year on the temporary exhibits. Mike built our garage. I mean, they're right back there. Raise your hands, you two, come on. When we call for volunteers, would a couple people show up? Look, this is what we see. Absolutely wonderful. And of course, it meant we had to have lots of meetings. And here I do want to just give credit to Judy Edlund, and her memorial service was just this last week. And she was our social chair for many years, but maybe you can find her pictures in there, some of you sitting in the audience, I think you can. Did we just have ordinary, boring meetings? Oh no, we made them fun, I think. We had tables and chairs when we could get into the building, red check tablecloths and wildflowers on the tables, and a few antiques to encourage conversation, and of course, always had treats. This is added just to show you that during these meetings, we would have the Dennis Knightsky, the district, Gunflint district ranger, sign agreements with us, so it was sort of part of all of our work being recognized. Speaking of signing, the big sign out front, Bruce Herplick did the stonework, Dave Seaton did the woodwork and the creative carving that you see, and Nancy, my daughter, did the painting.
Yay.
Is that Nancy? I don't even see her. Where are you, Nancy?
In the back.
Oh, there. Okay, all right, now, remember when I told you I emphasized the Blankford stove? Well, their cabin, sorry to say, or their home burned during the Ham Lake fire. And of course, Ron was my silent partner most of the time, but he was very active. And I said, Ron, we have to go see what happened at the Blankenburg place. He said, oh, you don't want to see that. And I said, yes, I do. And so we went, and of course, the stove was down in the cellar. And what a sad, sad thing to see. And then, and I can't even tell you who was so very kind to help with some of this, but I said to Ron, we have to save that stove for people to see again. And he said, you're kidding, who would do that? And then I answered, you. So he, that was as much as he could do to bring it back to life. And Kathy put flowers in pots on there, and we had it along the walking trail here for some years. And I would like to give credit to the person that hauled that stove out of the basement. Anybody know who that was that did that? No? Okay. And then, of course, it was a happy day when the big semi came with all of the makings for the museum, and the packages were all wrapped so carefully, but it filled the building. And then now here you'll see the finished product when they left. And by the way, this painting is called Springtime on the Gunflint, and the reason for that is that we had such limited space, we could not have a full-size moose and so on in the area, and so we have baby animals, and that of course means springtime. The flowers are also springtime flowers, and that's why it's called that. And then another exhibit here I just want to mention, you see that gorgeous chandelier on the upper right that Billy Needham carved one of those and had it in his cabin, and the gentleman, Leroy Ulrich, he's sitting right here in the front row, carved an exact replica of it, and it's hanging in there for all of us to enjoy. Thank you. And we had a grand opening, and nobody came. ribbon cutting. And you've probably gathered by now that I was the first president of the Historical Society. Sue was the vice president, and we divided the duties up. I told you I was in charge of presentation, and I consider myself more just a cheerleader through the whole time. And Sue was our historian, and she was in charge of the written word. And of course, other people helped in all of these areas. Please understand, I want to give everyone credit. Please understand. And then Pat Pierre, an Anishinaabe neighbor, gifted the crowd with drumming and singing a blessing, which we really appreciated. And then the next building that was to be built was the Nature Center. And Bob came up today from Cloquet, and he's sitting, it's his light that I'm using. There's Bob, thanks Bob. He was in charge of seeing that that building was completed.
This building.
Oh, the one we're in. Okay, sorry. Thank you, Judy. And we were sort of smart about one thing, or a couple things, but the temporary exhibits in the main museum building were designed in such a way that we could use them in the Nature Center when the Nature Center was built. And I'm talking now about this one right behind me here, and one over on that side. That one was done by Sue Weber, and this was my job to do the butterfly skippers and moths. And again, we had, should give credit to Dave McLean from Devil's Trap Lake, who was our expert to make sure everything was written correctly. Next came the Watercraft Building. During that time, I was having a couple of new knees and a new hip put in. So I can't say that that's part of my story, but I certainly cheered everybody on when I had a chance. And then here's Bob again. You'll see him from earliest days. Some of us always had in our plans that in order to really tell the story completely, we would have to have a cabin that people could walk into and feel like, oh, our family could have a vacation here. And here Bob and I were out scouting where the cabin would be, and he was certainly telling me, "I'm right over here." Thank you, Bob. And then there's the outside, you see the completed one there. And I'm telling you, I'm a year right now, at 84, maybe I was foolish, but I accepted the challenge to chair the committee that would furnish the cabin in the style of the 1950s. I only tell you that so that even if you're 84, you can still do something that's really helpful. And again, wonderful volunteers came forward, and I wanted to make sure we all remembered, and we still do, of course, that using, had to meet with masks at some time, and outside would come off. Bruce and Bill served faithfully. Of course, the owners could not go to IKEA to get their furniture, and Diamond Willow was the preferred wood of the resorters. So the furniture the pieces of furniture that were not contributed, we had to find people to make the pieces. And I want to give credit to someone here in the building today, and I just met him. Mr. Hedstrom, would you raise your hand? He built the bed in the cabin. When you go back there, you'll see it. And now let me continue, and we all know someone else perhaps. One corner in this building, here's an example of finding and also building. The washstand was beautifully newly created by Jerry from Mayhew Lake. Raise your hand, Jerry. I understand he has quite a lot of diamond willows in his workshop. Is that true, Jerry, or don't you want to even tell?
Not so much anymore.
Okay. Well, anyway, and it holds a chamber pot that was used at Gateway Hungry Jack Lodge, and this was owned by Sue Weber. Sue, I see you. Raise your hand. Come on.
Do I want to for a chamber pot?
The wash set was used by a family on Gunflint Lake. The framed mirror was made by Ragnar Nelson on Road Lake many years ago. So do you get the feeling of how this whole thing got put together? I mean, everybody contributed. And so please visit the cabin and the back and check it out. And try to imagine your family having a vacation there. Well, we talked about the wildflowers, the wild animals, the wildfire, wild wind, and the wilderness museum. However, there is one other very important ingredient, and that is family. Being a good neighbor on Gunflint Lake and up here means many things. You're always ready to help your neighbor, whatever situation they find themselves in. Maybe it's sawing down a tree, or maybe it's bringing over dinner some night. But I would like to just mention John Hendrickson in the upper corner and his wife Julie. And he is the person that really encouraged me along the way to write my book, and I should give him credit for that. And this other one is of the Gunflint gang out at Loon Lake Lodge having dinner. And now I just will hop over, because I see the clock is still ticking. You were introduced to our children, my children, in the first slides at Little Rock Falls. Well, special events in their lives take place during all these 50 years, and you might be wondering, what did they do? Well, Judy, right here, she got engaged on the shores of Gunflint Lake, and Nancy, way back there, got married in the Maple Hill Church, and the reception was, yes, you guessed it, at Gunflint Lodge, and Nancy and Dave met while working for the Kerfoots. Then let's go to the next generation. Our 4 grandsons enjoyed all the activities. Here are 2 of them fishing on Hemstad in the bay, and these 2 are also show that at a very young age they were part of the canoe races and canoeing. And of course, camping in the BWCA is part of it all, and they're all together there with an uncle. And then how about carving diamond willow with Grandpa, another grandson? And now let's go to another generation, which just happened a year ago. Last summer, the first great-grandchild that I had joined our family at the cabin. And he was only 7 months old here, and his curiosity in the natural world was, of course, encouraged. But it was amazing how he enjoyed not the plastic trucks, but the bark on the white pine. And you see it there. Did it warm a great-grandmother's heart? Oh, yes. Our family loves and respects the natural world that we found on the Gunflint. Now, as I look back over 50 years and see so many faces in the audience here today, nature has been truly a special gift to 5 generations of my family. And our dream of 50 years did come true. We all enjoyed it and benefited greatly by coming. My hope is that all of you here today, through seeing these experiences that I've shared, you can imagine and probably have just as many stories to tell me, but what nature on the Gunflint held for you or might hold for you and your family. I hope you'll go hiking and search for many of the treasures you've seen today. They are just waiting for you to discover them, just like my family did. And I want to close with a quote. And the clock is just at 3 o'clock, and I've had some interruptions. This quote is one that I have enlarged on my refrigerator door. I have carried a copy of it in my wallet. It is given credit, Pope Francis is given credit for this many places now, but it has been around many, many years before Pope Francis lived. So I just want to share this with you. Rivers do not drink their own water. Trees do not eat their own fruit. The sun does not shine on itself, and flowers do not spread their fragrance for themselves. Living for others is the rule of nature. We are all born to help each other. No matter how difficult it is, life is good when you're happy, but much better when others are happy because of you. Thank you. You know what, I forgot. Did I tell you what I had up? Oh, yes, I did. No. Okay, well, feel free to come up and look, and now are there questions? Covered everything?
I think you stumped us all. You got it all.
Oh, yes.
With creating your book, you had 4 pictures of each flower. How did you manage all that, to get all the seasons and?
Well, that's when I was telling you about this huge puzzle that I had with the 600 squares on it. And so it was a person, and I never planned to publish a book, by the way. That was not part of this, my life. It was really for people that came to my cabin and my family. But that's another story about all of that, getting it published. But it's really fun once you get started, you start filling in the blanks. And of course, you want to hear a story about the last photo I had to get? Okay, there was one thing, and the deadline was nearing. I had a couple weeks left, and I had to produce this picture of the seed of the water smart weed. You remember that picture of the water smart weed? And I called neighbors and said, "You've got to help me find this." And people were searching for it for me. Not anyone here today, but I guess other people. And I need it. I can't. They don't want to go to press without this shot. So I was over at Nancy's house, and Will was about 8, maybe at the most. Anyway, he wanted to go for a ride in the boat with Grandma and Grandpa. And so first we motored over to where you saw the water lilies, and we're looking at the water lilies, and of course I'm looking, isn't there one water smartweed here? And in the distance, and I mean this is truth, so help me. It was a long ways away, I saw a little speck, something black on the top of the water. And I said, Will, because by that time he wanted to use the oars and give us a ride too, so that's what was happening. We were just sort of floating around. And I said, do you see that, Will? Do you see that? Grandma wants to see that. And he says, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. I said, well, let's go over and see. It was the seed of the water smartweed. I took the picture and we went to press. But anyone else interested in asking or having any questions? Oh, well, good. I'm glad that. Oh, there's a hand.
Betty, when are you going to turn this into a book?
What?
Your 50 years on the Gunflint.
It's a present to all of you.
That's why we need a book.
Anybody can do what I did. Absolutely anyone. And nature is just out there waiting for you to enjoy it. And I see faces here today. I just, you know who you all are, what you've done for me and supported me through the past. And I appreciate you so much.